The rain hammered against our condo windows like angry fists, each drop catching the neon glow from the street below. I should have been asleep at midnight on a Tuesday, but instead, I stood in our hallway, listening to my wife Lyra giggle into her phone like a teenager sharing secrets at a slumber party. "Oh my God, Jenna, you should have seen Connor's face when I kissed him," she whispered, thinking I couldn't hear from the bedroom. He was so shocked, but he didn't pull away. My name is Mason Reddan, and until that moment, I thought I knew exactly who I was married to. Turns out, I'd been sharing a bed with a stranger for the past 3 years. I work as a freelance security consultant these days, though most people just call me a glorified private investigator. After 15 years of tracking down cheating spouses and insurance fraudsters in this decaying Midwest city, I'd developed a pretty good sense for when someone was lying to me. The irony wasn't lost on me that I'd missed the biggest lie of all happening right under my own roof. "And Alec?" Lyra continued, her voice dropping to what she probably thought was a seductive whisper. "Girl, that man knows exactly what he's doing with his hands." Alec Shaw. I knew that name. He owned 3 high-end gyms across the city and drove a custom Porsche that cost more than most people's houses. He also had a criminal record from his 20s that he'd managed to keep buried under layers of charitable donations and public relations campaigns. Connor Price had been my best friend since college. We'd stood up at each other's weddings, shared countless beers, and I'd trusted him with my life more times than I could count. Apparently, I'd also trusted him with my wife. "The best part is Mason has no idea," Lyra giggled again. "He's so focused on his little security jobs that he barely notices I exist anymore." That stung more than I wanted to admit. Sure, I'd been working longer hours lately, but only because I was trying to save up enough money to surprise her with a trip to Europe for our anniversary next month. I'd been planning it for 6 months, researching hotels in Paris and Rome, learning enough French to navigate the metro. I crept closer to the living room, keeping my footsteps silent on the hardwood floors. Through the crack in the door, I could see her curled up on our expensive leather couch, the one we'd spent 3 weekends shopping for because she insisted on finding the perfect shade of burgundy. "Honestly, Jenna, I think I'm falling for Alec," she said, twirling a strand of her blonde hair around her finger. "He makes me feel alive again, you know, like I'm actually worth something." The casual cruelty of those words hit me like a punch to the stomach. 3 years of marriage, and apparently I'd made her feel worthless. 3 years of coming home every night, of listening to her complain about her real estate clients, of supporting her through every mood swing and career change. "What about Mason?" I heard Jenna's voice through the phone speaker. "What about him?" Lyra shrugged. "He's stable, I guess. Good insurance. But God, he's boring. When's the last time he surprised me with anything? When's the last time he made me laugh?" I wanted to storm in there and remind her about the surprise birthday party I'd thrown for her last year, or the weekend getaway to the lake house I'd booked when she was stressed about her real estate license exam. But something held me back. Maybe it was professional instinct, or maybe it was the growing realization that I was looking at a stranger wearing my wife's face. "So what's your plan?" Jenna asked. "I don't know yet," Lyra admitted. "Alec's been talking about going away together, maybe to his place in Florida. He says he could set me up with a job at one of those luxury resort developments." "And leave Mason?" "Maybe. I mean, what's keeping me here? This apartment, this city? Mason's thrilling career following cheating husbands around parking lots?" She had no idea that those parking lots had taught me everything I needed to know about surveillance, documentation, and patience. She also had no idea that I'd been recording this entire conversation on my phone. Old habits from the private investigation business. I always kept a digital recorder app ready just in case. You never knew when someone might say something incriminating. "You're terrible," Jenna laughed. "But I love it. You deserve to be happy, Lyra. Life's too short to settle." "Exactly. And Alec makes me feel like the woman I'm supposed to be. Confident, desired, Alive. I'd heard enough. I slipped back to the bedroom and climbed into bed, pulling the covers up to my chin and closing my eyes. When Lyra finally came to bed 20 minutes later, I pretended to be asleep. She slid under the covers beside me, and for a moment I thought she might say something. Maybe apologize, maybe confess, maybe give me a chance to salvage whatever was left of our marriage. Instead, she rolled over and went to sleep. I lay there in the dark for hours, staring at the ceiling and listening to her breathe. The woman next to me had kissed my best friend. She was having an affair with Alec Shaw. She thought I was boring, worthless, and forgettable. She was probably right about all of those things. But she'd made one crucial mistake. She'd forgotten that boring, worthless, forgettable Mason Reddan used to make a living by destroying people's lives with nothing but patience, documentation, and a complete understanding of how to hit them where it hurt most. By morning, I'd made my decision. If Lyra wanted to feel alive, I was going to give her the most thrilling experience of her life. The next few days passed in a strange, surreal calm. Lyra went about her routine as if nothing had happened. She kissed me goodbye each morning, asked about my work each evening, and even suggested we watch a movie together on Friday night. I played along perfectly. Years of surveillance work had taught me how to wear a mask, how to act natural when everything inside me was screaming. I smiled at her jokes, nodded at her stories about difficult clients, and even held her hand during the romantic comedy she'd picked out. But while she was sleeping, or at work, or out with her friends, I was busy. The first step was information gathering. I'd learned long ago that knowledge was the most powerful weapon in any conflict. I needed to understand exactly what I was dealing with before I could formulate a proper response. Lyra's phone was easy enough to access. She used the same password for everything, her birthday followed by our wedding anniversary. Not very creative, but it made my job simpler. I cloned her device using software I'd picked up during my PI days, giving me access to all her messages, photos, and social media accounts. What I found was worse than I'd imagined. The affair with Alec had been going on for 4 months. It started at a real estate networking event where he'd been looking for an agent to handle some commercial properties. Their text messages read like a romance novel written by teenagers, full of heart emojis and promises to run away together. Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible Reddit stories. But Alec wasn't the only one. Lyra had been collecting male attention like trophies. There was Connor, of course, but also 3 other men from her social circle. She'd kissed 2 of them and had been sending inappropriate photos to the 3rd. The group chat with her girlfriends was particularly illuminating. Jenna wasn't just a passive listener. She was actively encouraging Lyra's behavior, even suggesting new targets and helping her plan accidental encounters. "Mason's such a pushover," Lyra had written just 2 weeks ago. "I could probably bring Alec home for dinner and he'd just sit there and take it." "You should try it," Jenna had responded. "See how far you can push him before he grows a spine." They were treating my marriage like a game, seeing how much they could get away with before I noticed. The casual contempt in their messages was breathtaking. But the real revelation came when I found the financial planning documents hidden in Lyra's email. She and Alec had been discussing their future together in concrete terms. He was planning to buy a house in Florida and wanted her to move there with him. They'd even looked at engagement rings. She was planning to leave me, but not before cleaning out our joint accounts and sticking me with the lease on our expensive condo. I sat in my car outside a coffee shop, reading through months of evidence on my tablet, and felt something cold and calculating settle into my chest. This wasn't just infidelity. It was a carefully orchestrated betrayal designed to leave me emotionally and financially destroyed. Lyra thought she was married to a boring, predictable man who would curl up and accept whatever scraps she decided to throw him. She had no idea that boring, predictable Mason Reddan had spent 15 years learning how to systematically dismantle people's lives. That evening, she came home with flowers and a bottle of wine, acting unusually affectionate. She'd probably been with Alec that afternoon and was feeling guilty. "I thought we could have a nice dinner together," she said, kissing my cheek. "Just the two of us." "That sounds perfect," I replied, taking the flowers and putting them in water. "I'll cook." We spent the evening talking and laughing like we used to in the early days of our relationship. For a moment, I almost forgot about everything I'd discovered. This was the woman I'd fallen in love with, the one who used to leave little notes in my lunch and call me in the middle of the day just to say she missed me. But then her phone buzzed with a text message, and I saw her face light up in a way it hadn't for me in months. "Sorry," she said, quickly silencing the phone. "Work stuff." I knew it wasn't work stuff. I knew exactly who had sent that message and what it probably said, but I just smiled and poured her another glass of wine. "No problem," I said. "I understand how demanding your job can be." Later that night, after she'd fallen asleep, I checked her phone again. The message had been from Alec. "Can't wait to hold you again tomorrow. This pretending is getting harder." Her response, "Soon. Just need to figure out the Mason situation." The Mason situation. That's what I'd become. Not her husband, not the man she'd promised to love and honor, just a situation that needed to be managed. I put her phone back on the nightstand and went to the kitchen to make myself a cup of coffee. I had work to do. The next morning started my favorite kind of operation, the kind where the target has no idea they're being hunted. Lyra kissed me goodbye and headed off to show a house to some clients, completely oblivious to the fact that I'd already started dismantling her life. My first stop was our bank. 3 years of marriage meant 3 years of joint accounts, shared credit cards, and financial entanglement that most people never think about until it's too late. Fortunately, I'd been the one handling most of our finances, which meant I had all the access codes and account numbers memorized. "I need to make some changes to our accounts," I told Jennifer, our personal banker. She'd handled our mortgage application and knew us both by name. "Of course, Mr. Reddan. What can I help you with today?" "I want to transfer the funds from our joint savings into my personal checking account, all of it." Jennifer looked slightly uncomfortable. "Well, since both names are on the account, you have every legal right to do that. But might I suggest discussing this with your wife first? These kinds of financial changes can sometimes cause marital tension." If only she knew. "Actually, this is for a surprise," I lied smoothly. "I'm planning something special for our anniversary, and I don't want Lyra to see the transactions and spoil it." That seemed to satisfy her. Within 30 minutes, I'd moved $43,000 out of Lyra's reach. It wasn't a fortune, but it was everything we'd saved together for the past 3 years, including the money for our planned European vacation. Next, I visited our credit card companies. As the primary account holder, I could add or remove authorized users at will. Lyra's shopping days were about to become much more complicated. "I need to remove my wife from all our accounts," I explained to the customer service representative. "We're getting divorced, and my lawyer advised me to separate our finances immediately." Another lie, but a convincing one. Within an hour, Lyra's access to our 3 credit cards had been revoked. She'd find out the hard way, probably when she tried to buy lunch later that day. But I was just getting started. My next stop was Connor's auto shop. He'd been running the place for 8 years, ever since his father retired, and I'd been bringing my car there for routine maintenance. We'd grab a beer afterward and talk about sports, work, life, normal friend stuff. Now I was looking at him differently. This was the man who'd kissed my wife and never said a word to me about it. "Mason!" Connor waved from under the hood of a Honda Civic. "What brings you by? Your inspection isn't due for another 3 months." "Actually, I wanted to ask you about something," I said, keeping my voice casual. "Lyra mentioned you two ran into each other at some party last weekend." Connor's face went pale so fast, I thought he might pass out. His wrench slipped and clanged against the engine block. "Oh yeah," he stammered. "That thing at Jenna's place. Just a bunch of people hanging out, you know." "She said you two had an interesting conversation." "Did she?" Connor wiped his hands on a rag, not meeting my eyes. "I don't really remember much. I might have had a few too many beers." I let the silence stretch out between us. It was an old interrogation technique. People hate awkward silence and will usually fill it with more information than they intended to share. "Look, Mason," Connor finally said, "if Lyra said something happened, it wasn't... we were both drinking and she was upset about something and..." "So something did happen." Connor's shoulders sagged. "She kissed me, okay? But I didn't kiss her back. Not really. It was just a stupid, drunken mistake and it didn't mean anything." "Did it occur to you to mention this to me?" What was I supposed to say? "Hey, buddy, your wife planted one on me at a party? I figured it would just cause problems between you two for no reason." "No reason." I repeated his words slowly, letting them hang in the air. "It was nothing, Mason, I swear. She was drunk, she was emotional, and she made a mistake. It lasted maybe 2 seconds before I pulled away." That wasn't what I'd heard on the recording, but I didn't correct him. "I appreciate you telling me the truth," I said. "And Connor, if anything like that happens again, I'd prefer to hear about it from you rather than finding out some other way." "Absolutely, of course. It won't happen again." I shook his hand and left him standing there, probably wondering exactly how much I knew and how much trouble he was in. The truth was, Connor was small potatoes compared to what I had planned for Lyra and Alec. But I needed him to understand that his loyalty was being tested, and he'd already failed once. My afternoon was spent at a storage facility across town, the kind of place where people keep old furniture and Christmas decorations. Lyra didn't know about this unit because I'd rented it under my business name 6 months ago when we were running out of space in our condo. What she also didn't know was that I'd been slowly moving our most valuable possessions here over the past few weeks. Her grandmother's antique jewelry, our good china, the expensive electronics we'd received as wedding gifts, even some of her designer clothes that she hadn't worn in months. It wasn't stealing. Technically, everything belonged to both of us. I was just relocating it for safekeeping. The storage unit was starting to look like a miniature version of our condo, minus the emotional baggage. I'd even moved my grandfather's gun collection here, though I had no intention of using those for anything more dramatic than target practice. My phone rang as I was arranging some boxes. It was Lyra. "Mason, something weird happened with my credit card today. It got declined at lunch, and when I called the company, they said I wasn't an authorized user anymore." "That's strange," I said, injecting just the right amount of concern into my voice. "Maybe it's some kind of computer error. I'll call them later and get it sorted out." "Could you?" I felt so embarrassed. I was with a client, and I had to ask her to pay for lunch. "Of course. Don't worry about it." "You're the best. I love you." "I love you too," I replied automatically. The words felt like ash in my mouth. That evening I cooked dinner again. Lyra seemed distracted, checking her phone every few minutes and barely touching her food. "Everything okay?" I asked. "Just work stuff. This client is being really demanding about some property details." I knew she was lying. I'd been monitoring her messages all day. The demanding client was actually Alec, and they were planning to meet at his gym after dinner for what they euphemistically called a private training session. "Well, don't let them stress you out too much," I said. "You work too hard as it is." After dinner, she claimed she needed to go back to the office to prepare some contracts. I kissed her goodbye and told her not to work too late. Then I followed her. Surveillance was like riding a bicycle. Once you learned how to do it properly, the skills never left you. I stayed 3 cars back, took a different route when possible, and parked across the street from Alec's gym with a clear view of the entrance. Lyra arrived at 8:30. Alec met her at the door with a kiss that lasted long enough to leave no doubt about their relationship. They disappeared inside together. I sat in my car for 2 hours, taking photos with a telephoto lens and documenting everything in a notebook. Times, locations, license plate numbers, descriptions of their behavior, old habits. When they finally emerged at 10:45, Lyra's hair was messed up and her blouse was wrinkled. Alec walked her to her car and kissed her goodbye like they were teenagers saying goodnight after prom. I followed her home, arriving 5 minutes after she did. She was already in the shower when I came through the front door. "How was work?" I called out. "Exhausting," she called back, "but productive. I think we're going to close on the Morrison property this week." Another lie. The Morrison property had closed 2 weeks ago. I made myself a sandwich and sat at the kitchen table, reviewing the photos on my camera. In the old days, this would have been the end of the case. I'd compile a report, hand over the evidence to the client, and collect my fee. But this time, I was both the investigator and the client, and I was just getting started. The next few days fell into a routine. Lyra would go to work, meet with clients, and then spend her evenings with Alec while telling me elaborate stories about her professional obligations. I would nod sympathetically, offer to help with her stress, and then document everything she was actually doing. The evidence was overwhelming. I had photos, text messages, financial records, and audio recordings. Any divorce lawyer in the city would have been salivating over a case this well documented. But I wasn't thinking about divorce lawyers. I was thinking about something much more satisfying. On Thursday, I paid a visit to Alec's gym during the lunch rush. It was exactly what I'd expected: gleaming equipment, motivational posters, and beautiful people in expensive workout clothes. Alec had built his brand around the idea of exclusive fitness for successful people. I signed up for a tour with one of his sales associates, a young woman named Brittany who looked like she'd stepped off the cover of a fitness magazine. "We pride ourselves on providing a premium experience," she explained as we walked through the weight room. "Our members include some of the city's most prominent business leaders." "That's exactly what I'm looking for," I said. "I've been thinking about upgrading my fitness routine, and I want to be around people who take their health seriously." "You'll love it here. And if you're interested in personal training, our owner Alec Shaw is absolutely amazing. He's worked with professional athletes, celebrities, even some Fortune 500 executives." "Alec Shaw," I repeated thoughtfully. "That name sounds familiar. Doesn't he have some kind of interesting background?" Brittany's smile flickered slightly. "Mr. Shaw has been very successful in the fitness industry." "Right. But didn't he have some legal troubles when he was younger? Something about assault charges?" Now her smile disappeared entirely. "I'm not really familiar with Mr. Shaw's personal history. Would you like to see our cardio equipment?" I let her change the subject, but I'd gotten what I came for. Alec's past wasn't common knowledge among his employees, which meant he'd worked hard to bury it. That gave me leverage. After the tour, I sat in the parking lot and researched Alec's criminal history on my laptop. It took some digging through old court records, but I found what I was looking for. Alexander Shaw had been arrested twice in his 20s, once for assault outside a nightclub and once for running an illegal gambling operation out of his apartment. The assault charges had been dropped when the victim declined to press charges, but the gambling conviction had stuck. He'd served 6 months in county jail and paid a substantial fine. None of this was secret information, but it wasn't the kind of thing that appeared on his gym's website either. His carefully crafted public image was built around overcoming adversity and helping others achieve their potential. The reality was a little more complicated. I made copies of all the court documents and added them to my growing file. That evening, Lyra announced that she needed to work late again. This time, she claimed to be meeting with a property developer about a new commercial project. "That's great," I said. "Which developer?" "Shaw Industries," she replied without hesitation. "They're looking at some retail space downtown." Shaw Industries was Alec's holding company for his various business interests. Lyra was getting sloppy with her lies, probably because I'd never questioned her before. "Sounds like a big opportunity," I said. "Maybe we should celebrate when you get home. I could pick up a bottle of that wine you like." "That would be wonderful, but don't wait up if I'm really late. These business dinners can go on forever." Business dinner. Right. After she left, I drove to Alec's penthouse building downtown. It was the kind of place that screamed money, marble lobby, concierge service, and probably a waiting list longer than most people's mortgage applications. I parked across the street and settled in for another surveillance session. Lyra arrived at 7:30, this time wearing a dress I'd never seen before. Alec met her in the lobby, and they took the elevator up together. I sat there for 3 hours, taking photos of everyone who entered and left the building. Around 10:30, an idea began forming in my mind. The building's security was impressive, but not impenetrable. The parking garage had a card reader, but I'd noticed that it also had a manual override for emergencies, the kind of thing that might be triggered by someone who knew how security systems worked. I wasn't ready to make that move yet, but it was good to know my options. When Lyra finally came home at midnight, I was already in bed pretending to sleep. She slipped in beside me, smelling like expensive cologne and lies. "How was your meeting?" I mumbled, as if she'd just woken me up. "Productive," she whispered. "I think we're going to make a lot of money on this deal." The only deal being made was the one that was going to cost her everything she thought she valued, but she'd find that out soon enough. Friday morning brought the first real test of my patience. Lyra woke up in an unusually good mood, humming while she got dressed, and even making coffee for both of us without being asked. She was practically glowing, and I had a pretty good idea why. "I have some exciting news," she said, settling down at our kitchen table with her mug. "Remember that Shaw Industries project I mentioned? Well, they want to take me on as their exclusive residential agent for a new development they're planning." "That sounds like a big opportunity," I replied, stirring sugar into my coffee. "What kind of timeline are we looking at?" "They want to move fast. Alec, Mr. Shaw thinks we could have the first phase ready for market within 6 months." She'd almost slipped and used his first name. Amateur mistake. "And this would be a long-term partnership?" "Potentially. He's even mentioned the possibility of opening a satellite office in Florida, near some of their other properties." There it was. The Florida plan, served up to me like she was discussing what to have for lunch. "Florida could be nice," I said carefully. "Different lifestyle, better weather." "Exactly." Her eyes lit up. "I mean, what's really keeping us here? Your work, I guess, but you could do security consulting anywhere, right?" "I suppose I could." I took a sip of coffee and watched her face. "Of course, it would mean leaving everything behind. Our friends, our life here. Sometimes you have to take risks to grow," she said, and I could hear Alec's influence in those words. "We're still young enough to start over somewhere new." What she meant was that she was young enough to start over with someone new. I was just supposed to be grateful for the opportunity to tag along. "Well, let's see how this project develops," I said. "No point in getting ahead of ourselves." "Of course. But Mason, I hope you'll keep an open mind about it. This could be exactly what we need to shake things up." After she left for work, I sat at the kitchen table and stared at the wall for a long time. The casual way she'd presented her escape plan was almost impressive in its audacity. She was going to gradually introduce the idea of moving to Florida, make it seem like a mutual decision, and then act surprised when I decided not to go. Or maybe she was planning something even more direct. Maybe the plan was to convince me to move, then leave me stranded in a state where I had no connections, no clients, and no support system. Either way, she'd underestimated me completely. I spent the morning making phone calls to some old contacts from my private investigation days. The security consulting business was steady, but not particularly exciting. Most of my clients wanted me to evaluate their home alarm systems or investigate employee theft. but I'd maintained relationships with people who handled more interesting cases. "Mason Reddan," said a gravelly voice when my call connected. "I thought you'd gone completely legitimate." "Hello, Frank. I'm still legitimate, but I need a favor." Frank Morrison had been a private investigator for 30 years before retiring to run background checks for corporate clients. He'd taught me most of what I knew about surveillance and evidence gathering. "What kind of favor?" "I need someone to run a comprehensive background check on Alec Shaw. He owns some gyms here in town, but I'm interested in his financial situation, business partnerships, anything that might not be public record." "This for a client?" "Personal matter." Frank was quiet for a moment. "You want to tell me what this is about?" "Let's just say Mr. Shaw has been conducting some business with my wife, and I'd like to know exactly who I'm dealing with." "Ah." Frank understood immediately. "Give me 48 hours. My next call was to a woman named Patricia Hendricks, who ran a small but very effective public relations firm. She specialized in crisis management for local businesses and politicians. "Patricia, it's Mason Reddan. I have a hypothetical question for you." "I don't like hypothetical questions, Mason. They usually turn out to be very real problems." "Fair enough. If someone wanted to damage a business owner's reputation without breaking any laws, what would be the most effective approach?" "That depends on the business and the owner. But generally speaking, the most devastating attacks are the ones that use true information presented in an unflattering context." "Such as?" "Past legal troubles, questionable business practices, personal behavior that contradicts their public image. The key is making sure everything you reveal is absolutely factual and well documented." "And the best venues for this kind of information?" "Social media, obviously. Local business journals, professional organizations. The goal is to reach their customer base and their peers simultaneously." I thanked Patricia and hung up, then spent the rest of the morning researching Alec's business connections. He belonged to the Chamber of Commerce, the Downtown Business Association, and something called the Midwest Fitness Professionals Network. He also sponsored several local charity events and had been featured in the business section of our newspaper twice in the past year. All of that gave me a roadmap for where his reputation mattered most. Around noon, my phone rang. It was Lyra. "Hey, honey. I'm having lunch with Jenna, and she wants to know if you'd like to join us. We're at that new place on 5th Street. This was interesting. In the 3 years we'd been married, Jenna had never invited me to join one of their lunches. "That's sweet of her to ask, but I'm pretty busy today. Tell her I said thanks, though." "Are you sure?" "She specifically asked about you." I was sure, but I was also curious about why Jenna suddenly wanted to see me. "Actually, you know what? I could probably take a quick break. I'll be there in 20 minutes. The restaurant was one of those trendy places that serve tiny portions of food with complicated names. Lyra and Jenna were sitting at a corner table, and I could see them talking intensely when I walked in. "Mason!" Jenna jumped up and gave me an overly enthusiastic hug. "I'm so glad you could make it." Jenna was the kind of woman who treated every social interaction like a performance. She was always on, always working an angle, always trying to be the center of attention. She'd been Lyra's friend since college, and I'd never particularly liked her. "Thanks for including me," I said, taking the empty chair between them. "I was just telling Lyra how lucky she is to have such a supportive husband," Jenna said, batting her eyelashes. "Not every man would be so understanding about his wife's demanding career." "Lyra works hard," I agreed. "I'm proud of what she's accomplished. And all those late nights and business dinners. You must really trust her." There it was. Jenna was fishing, trying to figure out how much I knew. "Trust is the foundation of any good marriage," I said, looking directly at Lyra. "Without it, you don't really have anything, do you?" Lyra shifted uncomfortably in her seat. "Mason's always been very supportive of my independence." "That's so refreshing," Jenna continued. "Some men get jealous when their wives spend time with other people, especially successful, attractive men." "Jealousy is usually based on insecurity," I replied. I'm confident enough in our relationship that I don't worry about Lyra's professional interactions. This was actually fun. Jenna thought she was being subtle, but she was about as subtle as a car alarm. Speaking of professional interactions, I continued, Lyra mentioned she's working with Shaw Industries on some new development project. That must be exciting. Oh yes, Jenna said quickly. Alec Shaw is such a respected businessman, very professional, very ethical. I'm sure he is. I'd love to meet him sometime, actually. Maybe we could all have dinner together. Lyra nearly choked on her salad. He's very busy with the business side of things. I mostly work with his development team. That's too bad. It would be nice to put a face to the name, you know? We finished lunch with more small talk, but I could see that both women were rattled. Jenna had failed to get the information she was looking for, and Lyra was probably wondering how much I actually knew about her professional interactions. As we were leaving, Jenna pulled me aside. Mason, can I ask you something? As a friend? Of course. Are you and Lyra okay? Really okay? She seemed a little, distracted lately. We're fine, I said. Marriage has its ups and downs, but we're working through things. Good, because I'd hate to see anything happen to you two. You're such a perfect couple. Perfect couple. Right. That afternoon, I drove to the storage unit to add some more items to my collection. I'd been gradually removing things from our condo for weeks, but I was accelerating the timeline now. Photo albums, important documents, anything with sentimental or financial value. I was loading a box of Lyra's college textbooks into the unit when my phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. We need to talk. Meet me at the drop zone at 6 p.m. Come alone. Connor. The drop zone was a dive bar on the outskirts of town, the kind of place where people went when they didn't want to be seen. Connor was obviously feeling guilty about something, and guilt made people do stupid things. I finished loading the storage unit and drove home to wait. Lyra was already there when I arrived, sitting at the kitchen table with her laptop open and papers spread everywhere. How was lunch with Jenna? I asked. Fine. She really likes you, you know. She was saying how lucky I am to have such an understanding husband. Jenna's always been sweet. She also mentioned that she and some of the girls are planning a weekend trip to Chicago next month. Kind of a girls' getaway thing. Another lie. I'd seen the messages between Lyra and Jenna. There was no trip to Chicago, but there was a plan for Lyra to spend a weekend at Alec's place in Florida. That sounds like fun, I said. You should go. You've been working so hard lately, you deserve a break. Really? You wouldn't mind? Of course not. I trust you completely. The irony was lost on her, but I enjoyed saying it anyway. At 6 o'clock, I walked into the drop zone and found Connor sitting in a corner booth, nursing a beer and looking like he'd rather be anywhere else. The bar was nearly empty, just a few regulars watching a baseball game on the television above the bar. Thanks for coming, Connor said as I sat down across from him. What's this about? He took a long drink of beer before answering. I've been thinking about what happened at that party, about what I should have told you. And? There's more to it than just the kiss, Mason. Things you need to know. I waited for him to continue. Lyra's been asking me questions about you. Personal stuff. Your work schedule, your habits, whether you've seemed suspicious about anything. What kind of questions? Like, has your behavior changed lately? Are you acting differently? Do you seem like you suspect anything? And what did you tell her? Connor looked miserable. I told her you seemed fine, normal. But Mason, I think she's planning something bad. Such as? I don't know exactly, but she's been talking to Jenna about it, and Jenna's been asking around about divorce lawyers. Good ones. The kind that specialize in taking guys to the cleaners. This was interesting. Lyra was preparing for legal warfare, which meant she was planning to make her exit soon. There's something else, Connor continued. That guy she's seeing, Alec Shaw, he's got a reputation. What kind of reputation? The kind where his business partners sometimes end up regretting their association with him. I know a guy who used to work at one of his gyms. Says Alex got connections to some people you don't want to mess with. What kind of connections? The kind that help you solve problems when the legal system won't. Connor was trying to warn me that Alec might be dangerous, which was actually useful information, but I could see something else in his expression. Fear. Connor, what aren't you telling me? He finished his beer in one gulp and signaled the bartender for another. Lyra asked me to do something, he said finally. Something that would help her in a divorce. What kind of something? She wants me to say that I've seen you with other women, that you've been cheating on her. And I told her I couldn't do that. But Mason, I don't think she's going to take no for an answer. Now I understood why Connor looked so scared. He'd gotten himself caught in the middle of something much bigger than a drunken kiss at a party. What exactly did she say when you refused? She said I owed her, because of what happened between us. She said if I didn't help her, she'd tell you that I was the one who came on to her. And was that true? Connor met my eyes for the first time since I'd sat down. No, it wasn't. She kissed me, Mason. And when I tried to pull away, she grabbed my shirt and held on, said she was tired of being married to someone who didn't appreciate her. Why didn't you tell me this before? Because I was embarrassed, and because I was afraid you wouldn't believe me. I believed him. It fit perfectly with everything else I'd learned about Lyra's behavior. So what's your plan now? I asked. I don't know. I was hoping you might have some ideas. I did have ideas, lots of them, but Connor didn't need to know about those yet. Here's what you're going to do, I said. You're going to tell Lyra that you've changed your mind, that you'll testify that I've been cheating. Connor's eyes widened. What? Why? Because I want to know exactly what she's planning, and because I want her to think she's winning. But if I do that, won't it hurt you in the divorce? Let me worry about the divorce. Can you do this for me? Connor nodded reluctantly. Yeah, I guess. But Mason, be careful. I think Lyra's more dangerous than either of us realized. He was right about that. But so was I. And she was about to find out just how dangerous a boring, predictable husband could be when he finally decided to stop playing defense. The weekend arrived with unseasonable warmth, the kind of October day that makes you forget winter is coming. Lyra announced she wanted to spend Saturday shopping downtown and suggested we make it a date day. We haven't done anything fun together in weeks, she said, linking her arm through mine as we walked down 5th Street. I miss this. It was a convincing performance. If I hadn't known about Alec, about the Florida plans, about the divorce lawyer consultations, I might have actually believed she was trying to reconnect with our marriage. This is nice, I agreed. We should do it more often. We spent the morning browsing through boutiques and art galleries, acting like the happy couple we used to be. Lyra bought a dress that cost more than most people's car payments, charging it to a credit card I'd forgotten to cancel. I made a mental note to handle that on Monday. Let's get lunch at that place on the riverfront, she suggested. The one with the outdoor seating. The restaurant overlooked the Ohio River, and we got a table with a perfect view of the water. Lyra ordered a bottle of wine that cost $60, and for a moment I wondered if she was planning to confess everything. Instead, she started talking about the future. I've been thinking about what you said the other day, she began, swirling the wine in her glass. About being open to new opportunities. Oh? This Shaw Industries project could really be a game changer for us, Mason. Not just financially, but in terms of lifestyle. How so? Well, Alec, Mr. Shaw has been very impressed with my work. He's hinted that if this development goes well, there could be opportunities to expand into other markets. Such as Florida? Her eyes lit up. Exactly. He has properties all over the state, and he needs someone he can trust to handle the residential side. And he trusts you? He says I have exactly the kind of vision he's looking for. Someone who understands what successful people want in a home. What successful people wanted, apparently, was someone else's wife. That's quite a compliment, I said. He must think very highly of your professional skills. He does. And Mason, I know this might sound crazy, but I think we should seriously consider it. Moving to Florida, I mean. It's a big decision. I know, but what's really keeping us here? Your clients? You could build a new client base anywhere. Your family? Your parents moved to Arizona 2 years ago. She'd been thinking about this more seriously than I'd realized. She'd actually analyzed all the obstacles to my agreeing to move. What about our friends? I asked. We'd make new friends. Better friends, probably. The kind of people who are going places in life. People like Alec Shaw? People like successful entrepreneurs, yes. Mason, I love you, but I think we've gotten stuck in a rut here. The same routine, the same people, the same conversations every day. And you think Florida would change that? I think Florida would give us a chance to become the people we're supposed to be. The people we're supposed to be. According to Lyra, I was supposed to be someone who quietly followed her to Florida and pretended not to notice when she started spending more and more time with her new business partner. It's worth considering, I said finally. But I'd want to meet this Shaw guy first. Get a sense of what kind of man I'd be trusting with my wife's career. Lyra's fork paused halfway to her mouth. That might be difficult to arrange. He's very busy, and he doesn't usually meet with spouses. I'm sure he could make an exception, especially if he's serious about this partnership. I'll ask, she said, but I could tell she had no intention of arranging that meeting. We finished lunch and walked along the riverfront, holding hands like newlyweds. Lyra pointed out an expensive condo development that had just opened, wondering aloud what it would be like to live right on the water. We could probably afford something like that if we sold the condo and moved somewhere with a lower cost of living, she said. Somewhere like Florida? Exactly. By the time we got home, I was exhausted from pretending. Lyra curled up on the couch to watch a movie, but I excused myself to check email in my home office. What I actually did was review the surveillance photos I'd taken over the past week. Lyra and Alec entering his building. Lyra and Alec having dinner at an expensive restaurant. Lyra and Alec walking through a park, his arm around her waist. I'd documented enough evidence to destroy her in any divorce proceeding, but that wasn't enough anymore. I wanted something more personal, more satisfying. My phone buzzed with a text from Frank Morrison. Got that background report you wanted. Some interesting stuff here. Can we meet Monday morning? I texted back that Monday would be perfect. That evening, Lyra announced that she needed to go into the office to prepare for a Monday morning client meeting. On Sunday night? I asked. I know it's unusual, but this client is flying in from out of town, and I want everything to be perfect. Which client? The Morrison Group. They're looking at some commercial properties downtown. The Morrison Group was a real estate investment firm based in Chicago. I knew this because I'd handled a security consultation for them 6 months ago. I also knew that they didn't have any deals pending in our city. That sounds important, I said. Don't work too late. After she left, I drove to Alec's building again. Sure enough, Lyra's car was in the parking garage by 8 o'clock. I settled in for another surveillance session, but this time I had a different plan. At 10:30, I called the building's main number. Alec Shaw's residence, please, I said when the concierge answered. May I ask who's calling? This is Detective Morrison with the city police. We need to speak with Mr. Shaw about an ongoing investigation. One moment, please. A few seconds later, Alec's voice came on the line. This is Alec Shaw. What can I do for you, Detective? Mr. Shaw, we've received a complaint about noise disturbances coming from your unit. Several neighbors have called in the past hour. That's impossible. I'm having a quiet evening with a friend. I'm sure it's just a misunderstanding, but we're required to follow up on all complaints. Could you and your friend step out onto your balcony so our officer can see that everything is okay? Your officer? He's positioned across the street with binoculars, standard procedure for noise complaints in high-rise buildings. Through my telephoto lens, I watched Alec's balcony. A few minutes later, he and Lyra stepped outside. She was wearing a silk robe that definitely didn't belong to her. I snapped a dozen photos before they went back inside. Everything looks fine from here, I said into the phone. Thank you for your cooperation, Mr. Shaw. Wait, what's your badge number? I hung up. Monday morning, I met Frank Morrison at a diner near the river. He slid a thick manila folder across the table and ordered black coffee. Your boy Shaw is an interesting character, Frank said. On the surface, everything looks legitimate. Successful businessman, pays his taxes, contributes to charity. And below the surface? Below the surface, he's got some expensive habits and some questionable associates. Frank opened the folder and pulled out several documents. His gym business is profitable, but not as profitable as his lifestyle would suggest. He's got 3 mortgages, 2 car loans, and about $40,000 in credit card debt. So he's overextended. That's putting it mildly. But here's where it gets interesting. 6 months ago, he suddenly paid off most of his debts, dropped about $200,000 in cash to clear his accounts. Where did the money come from? That's the question, isn't it? No record of any loans, no inheritance, no business windfall, just a sudden influx of cash from an untraceable source. Frank pulled out another document. Then there's his business partner, a guy named Vincent Carrera. Carrera's got connections to some very unpleasant people in Chicago, the kind who help solve financial problems in exchange for future considerations. What kind of future considerations? The kind where you help them launder money through legitimate businesses, like, say, a chain of successful gyms. This was better than I'd hoped. Alec wasn't just a cheating boyfriend. He was potentially involved in organized crime. There's more, Frank continued. Shaw's been looking at properties in Florida, but not the kind you'd expect. Industrial properties, warehouses, places that would be perfect for moving large quantities of merchandise without attracting attention. And my wife thinks he's going to set her up as a residential real estate agent. Your wife might be in for a surprise. I thanked Frank and paid for his coffee. The information was worth its weight in gold, but I needed to be careful about how I used it. That afternoon, I got a call from Connor. I talked to Lyra, he said. Told her I'd changed my mind about the testimony thing. How did she react? She was thrilled. Started talking about how grateful she was, how this was going to make everything so much easier. Did she give you any details about her timeline? She wants to file for divorce next month. Says her lawyer thinks they can get everything wrapped up quickly if they have evidence of your infidelity. And she wants you to testify that you've seen me with other women? Yeah. She even gave me a name to use. Said I should say I saw you with someone named Rebecca at a hotel downtown. Rebecca was the name of my ex-girlfriend from college. We'd broken up 8 years ago, and she'd moved to Seattle. Lyra was being thorough. Anything else? She mentioned something about a business opportunity in Florida. Said once the divorce was final, she might be moving out of state. Did she mention Alec Shaw? Not by name, but she said her new business partner was going to help her start over somewhere fresh. After I hung up with Connor, I sat in my car outside the storage facility and thought about timing. Lyra was planning to file for divorce next month, which gave me about 3 weeks to execute my own plan. 3 weeks to turn her life upside down and show her exactly what happened when you underestimated Mason Reddan. I pulled out my phone and started making calls. The first call was to Patricia Hendricks, the public relations consultant. Patricia, it's Mason. I'm ready to discuss that hypothetical situation we talked about. I was wondering when you'd call back. What do you need? I need to destroy someone's reputation completely, someone who's built their entire identity around being successful and respected. And you have documentation to support whatever claims you want to make? I have documentation, photographs, financial records, and criminal background information. Then we can definitely work together. When do you want to start? Immediately. My second call was to a contact at the local newspaper, a reporter named Jennifer Walsh who specialized in business investigations. Jennifer, it's Mason Reddan. I have a story that might interest you. What kind of story? The kind that involves local business fraud, possible money laundering, and connections to organized crime. I'm listening. Not over the phone. Can we meet tomorrow? Absolutely. My third call was to the State Real Estate Licensing Board. I'd like to file a complaint against a licensed agent, I told the receptionist. What type of complaint? Professional misconduct, specifically using client relationships for personal gain and misrepresenting business partnerships. I'll transfer you to our investigations department. By the time I finished making calls, I had meetings scheduled for the next 3 days. Patricia would handle the social media campaign. Jennifer would investigate the criminal connections. The licensing board would look into Lyra's professional conduct. But those were just the opening moves. The real game was about to begin. Tuesday morning brought the first crack in Lyra's perfect facade. I was drinking coffee and reading the newspaper when she came into the kitchen, her phone pressed to her ear and panic written across her face. "What do you mean? Suspended?" she was saying. "There has to be some mistake." I looked up from the sports section with what I hoped was an expression of innocent concern. "Is everything okay?" I whispered. She held up a hand to silence me and continued her conversation. "No, I understand that complaints have to be investigated, but this is ridiculous. I've never done anything unethical in my entire career." The Real Estate Licensing Board had moved faster than I'd expected. I'd filed my complaint yesterday afternoon, and they were already taking action. "Fine," Lyra said into the phone. "I'll be there this afternoon with all my documentation, but I want this resolved quickly." She hung up and slumped into the chair across from me. "The state licensing board got some kind of anonymous complaint about my business practices," she said. "They're suspending my license pending an investigation." "That's terrible," I said, reaching across the table to squeeze her hand. "What kind of complaint?" "Something about misusing client relationships and misrepresenting business partnerships. It's completely false, but I have to prove that." "I'm sure you will. You're the most honest person I know." The irony was apparently lost on her. "This couldn't have come at a worse time," she continued. "I have 3 major deals pending, including the Shaw Industries project. Maybe Mr. Shaw will understand. These things happen in business." Maybe, but she didn't look convinced. After Lyra left for her emergency meeting with the licensing board, I drove downtown to meet with Jennifer Walsh at the newspaper office. She was exactly what I'd expected from her investigative pieces, sharp, skeptical, and hungry for a good story. "So tell me about Alec Shaw," she said, pulling out a digital recorder. "What do you want to know?" "Everything. Start with why you think he's worth investigating." I spent the next hour walking her through everything Frank had discovered. The mysterious cash influx, the connections to Vincent Carrera, the Florida property purchases, the criminal background that Shaw had worked so hard to bury. "This is good stuff," Jennifer said, taking notes. "But I'll need to verify everything independently before we can publish anything." "I understand. How long will that take?" "Give me a week, maybe 2 if Carrera proves difficult to track down." "And if everything checks out?" "Then Alec Shaw is going to have a very bad month." That afternoon, I met with Patricia Hendricks to discuss the social media strategy. "The key is to make it look organic," she explained. "We don't want it to seem like a coordinated attack. We want it to look like concerned citizens sharing information." "What kind of information?" "Court records mostly. His assault arrest, the gambling conviction, some of the more questionable business deals he's been involved in. All public information, but presented in a way that raises questions about his character." And this will reach his customers? His customers, his business partners, his investors, and anyone else who might be considering doing business with him. By the time we're finished, Alec Shaw's reputation will be radioactive. That evening, Lyra came home looking defeated. Her meeting with the licensing board hadn't gone well. "They're taking this complaint seriously," she said, pouring herself a large glass of wine. "I might be suspended for weeks while they investigate." "What does that mean for your deals?" "I'll have to transfer them to other agents, including the Shaw Industries project." "I'm sorry, honey. Is there anything I can do to help?" "Not unless you know who filed the complaint, because when I find out, I'm going to make their life very difficult." "I'm sure it was just a misunderstanding. Maybe a competitor who's jealous of your success." "Maybe." She took a long drink of wine. "Mason, can I ask you something?" "Of course." "Have you noticed anyone following you lately, or taking pictures of you?" My heart rate spiked, but I kept my expression neutral. "Following me? No. Why?" I've had this weird feeling lately, like someone's been watching me. Probably just paranoia because of all this stress." "That does sound stressful. Maybe you should take a few days off, try to relax." "I can't afford to relax right now, not with everything falling apart." But everything wasn't falling apart randomly. Everything was falling apart according to my carefully orchestrated plan. Wednesday brought the next phase of the operation. I spent the morning at the storage facility, organizing all of Lyra's possessions that I'd been gradually relocating over the past few weeks. Her grandmother's jewelry, her college photo albums, her expensive clothes, even some furniture that she hadn't noticed was missing yet. When she finally figured out what had happened, it would be too late to do anything about it. My phone rang while I was inventorying a box of her books. "Mason, it's Connor. We need to talk." "What's wrong?" "Lyra called me this morning. She's freaking out about something. Says she thinks someone's trying to sabotage her career." "What did you tell her?" "Nothing. But she wants to meet tonight. Says she needs my help with something important." "What kind of help?" She wouldn't say over the phone, but, Mason, she sounded desperate. Desperate people made mistakes, and I was counting on Lyra to make a big one. "Where are you meeting her?" "The drop zone, 8 o'clock. "Connor, I want you to record that conversation." "What? Why?" "Because I have a feeling she's going to say something we can use later." That afternoon, Patricia called with an update on the social media campaign. "We're getting good traction," she reported. "The posts about Shaw's criminal background have been shared over 300 times in the past 24 hours. "Any response from Shaw himself?" "Not yet, but several people have posted comments asking whether they should cancel their gym memberships." "And his business partners?" "Two of his investors called my office asking for more information. I referred them to the court records." Things were moving faster than I'd anticipated. By Thursday, Alec Shaw was going to wake up to find his carefully constructed reputation in ruins. But I wasn't finished with him yet. That evening, while Lyra was meeting with Connor at the drop zone, I paid another visit to Alec's building. This time, I wasn't there for surveillance. I was there for sabotage. The building's parking garage used a standard card reader system, the kind I'd installed for dozens of clients over the years. It took me less than 5 minutes to override the security panel and gain access. Alec's custom Porsche was parked in his reserved spot, gleaming under the fluorescent lights like a trophy. He'd probably spent more on that car than most people made in 3 years. I didn't damage the car. That would have been too obvious, and probably illegal. Instead, I did something much more creative. I placed a small GPS tracking device under the rear bumper, the kind used by private investigators to monitor cheating spouses. Then, I attached a second device to the exhaust pipe, a small speaker that would emit a high-pitched whining sound whenever the engine was running. The tracking device would let me monitor Alec's movements in real time. The speaker would drive him absolutely crazy without causing any actual damage to his precious car. But the real surprise was waiting in his penthouse. I'd been watching the building long enough to learn the staff routines. The concierge took a break every night at 9:30. The security guard made his rounds every hour on the half hour, and the cleaning crew had access to every unit in the building. It took me 20 minutes to convince the cleaning supervisor that I was a building inspector following up on a noise complaint, another 10 minutes to get access to Alec's unit. The penthouse was exactly what I'd expected: expensive furniture, abstract art, and a view that probably cost him $5,000 a month in rent. It was the kind of place designed to impress women like Lyra. I didn't steal anything. I didn't break anything. I didn't even move anything. What I did was much more subtle. I loosened the connections on his cable box, his internet router, and his sound system. Not enough to cause immediate failure, but enough to create intermittent problems that would be impossible to diagnose. I adjusted his thermostat so it would randomly fluctuate between 65 and 80 degrees throughout the night. I programmed his coffee maker to start brewing at 3 in the morning, and I placed a small device in his bedroom that would emit random clicking sounds at irregular intervals. None of it was permanent damage. All of it would drive him slowly insane. When I got home, Lyra was already there, sitting at the kitchen table with her laptop open and papers scattered everywhere. "How was your evening?" I asked. "Productive. Connor's going to help me figure out who's behind all these problems I've been having." "That's good of him. What kind of help?" "He has some contacts in the private investigation business, people who might be able to track down whoever filed that complaint with the licensing board." This was interesting. Lyra was planning to investigate her own investigation. "Sounds expensive," I said. "It'll be worth it if we can find out who's trying to destroy my career." "Any theories?" "I think it might be someone from Alec's past, someone who has a grudge against him and is trying to get to him through me." She was closer to the truth than she realized. Someone from Alec's past was definitely involved in her current problems. That someone was me. "Well, I hope you figure it out soon," I said. "This stress isn't good for you." "I know. But Mason, I want you to be careful too. If someone's willing to file false complaints against me, they might try to cause problems for you as well." "I'll be careful," I promised. "Good, because I couldn't handle losing you on top of everything else." The casual way she said it was almost funny. She was planning to divorce me and move to Florida with her boyfriend, but she was worried about losing me. Thursday morning brought news that made all my planning worthwhile. Jennifer Walsh called at 7:30, barely able to contain her excitement. "Mason, you're not going to believe what I found. Tell me. Vincent Carrera isn't just Alec Shaw's business partner. He's under federal investigation for money laundering. The FBI has been watching him for 6 months. And Shaw? Shaw is what they call a person of interest. They think he's been helping Carrera move money through his gym business, but they haven't been able to prove it yet. What does this mean for your story?" "It means I'm not just writing about a local businessman with a shady past. I'm writing about someone who might be actively involved in federal crimes." "When will the story run?" "Tomorrow's edition, front page of the business section." By Friday morning, Alec Shaw's world was going to collapse, and Lyra's world was going to collapse right along with it. But I still had one more surprise in store for both of them. The kind of surprise that would make everything else look like a warm-up act. Friday morning arrived with the kind of crisp autumn air that makes you think about new beginnings. I was up early, drinking coffee and waiting for the newspaper delivery. When it finally arrived, I spread it out on the kitchen table and smiled at the headline, "Local Gym Owner Under Federal Investigation." Jennifer Walsh had done excellent work. The article laid out everything: Alec's criminal background, his connection to Vincent Carrera, the suspicious cash transactions, even speculation about the Florida properties. She'd managed to make it all sound factual and objective, while completely destroying his reputation. Lyra was still asleep, so I had time to read the entire article twice before she stumbled into the kitchen in her bathrobe. "Morning," she mumbled, heading straight for the coffee maker. "Morning. You might want to see this." I handed her the newspaper, folded to Jennifer's article. Lyra's face went white as she read. then red, then white again. "This is impossible," she whispered. "Alec's not. He wouldn't." Sounds like the FBI disagrees. But this reporter doesn't know him. She's just repeating rumors and speculation. The court records aren't rumors, Lyra, and neither are the financial transactions. She read the article again, more carefully this time. "This is going to destroy him," she said finally. "Probably. Though if he's innocent, I'm sure he'll be able to clear his name." "And if he's not innocent?" "Then you're lucky you found out before you got too involved in any business deals with him." Lyra stared at the newspaper for a long time without speaking. I could practically see her mind working, trying to figure out how this would affect her plans. "I need to call him," she said finally. "That might not be a good idea. If he really is under federal investigation, you don't want to get caught up in it." "But I can't just abandon him. We have a business relationship. Lyra, you're a real estate agent, not his lawyer. Your job is to sell houses, not to provide emotional support to clients who might be criminals." She looked at me strangely, as if she was seeing me clearly for the first time in months. "You're right," she said slowly. "I need to protect my own reputation." "Exactly. Distance yourself from the whole situation and focus on rebuilding your career." "If I still have a career after all this." "You will. You're talented and hardworking. One bad client isn't going to define you." It was almost sad, watching her try to process the collapse of her escape plan. She'd been so certain that Alec was her ticket to a better life, and now she was realizing that he might actually be her ticket to federal prison. After Lyra left for what she claimed was a client meeting, I drove to the storage facility to make some final preparations. Tomorrow was Saturday, and I had planned something special for the weekend, something that would bring everything full circle. My phone rang while I was loading some boxes into my car. "Mason, it's Patricia. Have you seen the news this morning?" "About Alec Shaw?" "Yes, I saw the article." "Not just the article. Check the local business websites. Check social media. Your boy is having a very bad day." I pulled out my phone and started browsing. Patricia was right. The story had exploded across every local media platform. The Chamber of Commerce had issued a statement distancing themselves from Shaw. 2 of his gym locations had been visited by federal agents. His investors were demanding answers. "How bad is it?" I asked. "Career-ending bad. Maybe prison bad, depending on what the FBI finds." "And his gyms?" 3 major corporate clients have already canceled their memberships. His staff is probably updating their resumes as we speak. It was better than I'd hoped. Alec Shaw wasn't just losing his reputation, he was losing everything, but I still wasn't finished with him. That afternoon, I paid a visit to Connor's auto shop. "Mason," he said when he saw me, "I was hoping you'd stop by. How did your meeting with Lyra go last night?" "Strange. Really strange." Connor wiped his hands on a rag and looked around to make sure we were alone. "She wanted me to help her investigate who's been causing her problems." "And?" "I recorded the conversation like you asked, but Mason, some of the things she said, I think you need to hear this." He pulled out his phone and played an audio file. Lyra's voice came through the speaker, sounding stressed and angry. "Someone's been watching me, Connor, following me, taking pictures. They know about Alec." "What do you mean, they know about Alec?" "They know we've been seeing each other. They know about the Florida plans. Someone's been gathering information about my personal life." "Who would do that?" "I don't know. But whoever it is, they're trying to destroy everything I've worked for." Connor's voice. "Maybe you should tell Mason what's going on. He might be able to help." Lyra laughed bitterly. "Mason? Connor, Mason's the problem." "What do you mean?" "I mean, he's boring, he's predictable, and he's holding me back from everything I want in life. I was planning to leave him anyway, but now someone's forcing my hand." "So what are you going to do?" "I'm going to file for divorce next week, and I'm going to make sure I get everything I'm entitled to." The recording ended. "There's more," Connor said. "She asked me to lie about seeing you with other women. Said it would help her in the divorce proceedings. And what did you tell her?" "I told her I'd think about it, but Mason, I can't do that to you." "Actually, Connor, I want you to do exactly what she asked." "What? Why?" "Because I want her to think she's winning, right up until the moment she realizes she's lost everything." That evening, Lyra came home looking like she'd been through a war. Her hair was disheveled, her makeup was smeared, and her hands were shaking. "Rough day?" I asked. "You could say that." She poured herself a glass of wine and drank half of it in one gulp. "Want to talk about it?" "Alec's finished," she said flatly. "His lawyers told him to cut all ties with anyone who might be connected to the federal investigation." "Including you?" "Including me. 3 months of work, down the drain." "I'm sorry. I know how much that project meant to you." "It wasn't just a project, Mason. It was my future." "You'll find other opportunities." "Will I? My license is suspended, my biggest client is under federal investigation, and someone out there is actively trying to destroy my career." "Who would want to destroy your career?" Lyra looked at me for a long moment, and I could see suspicion flickering in her eyes. "I don't know," she said finally, "but I'm going to find out." Saturday morning, I woke up early and made breakfast for both of us. Pancakes, bacon, fresh orange juice. The kind of meal we used to enjoy on lazy weekend mornings when we were happy. "This is nice," Lyra said, though she barely touched her food. "I thought we could use some normal time together. Things have been so stressful lately." "Mason, can I ask you something?" "Of course." "Do you think our marriage is worth saving?" The question caught me off guard, even though I'd been expecting it for weeks. "Why would you ask that?" "Because I feel like we've been drifting apart. Like we want different things from life." "What kind of different things?" "I want excitement, adventure, the chance to build something meaningful." "And you don't think we can build something meaningful together?" "I don't know." "Can we?" I reached across the table and took her hand. "Lyra, I love you. I've always loved you. But if you're not happy, if you think you'd be better off with someone else, then maybe we should talk about that honestly." "Someone else?" "I'm not blind, Lyra. I know you've been spending time with other people. I know you've been thinking about leaving." For a moment, I thought she might confess everything, apologize, beg for forgiveness, try to salvage our marriage. Instead, she pulled her hand away. "I think we should take some time apart," she said. "Figure out what we really want." "How much time?" "I don't know. A few weeks, maybe. I could stay with Jenna while we sort things out." "And after we sort things out?" "We'll see." What she meant was that she'd file for divorce as soon as she figured out how to maximize her settlement. She was still planning to leave me. She was just adjusting her timeline because Alec was no longer available. "If that's what you want," I said, "it is. Then I'll help you pack." That afternoon, we loaded Lyra's clothes and personal items into her car. She took everything she thought was valuable, her jewelry, her laptop, her important documents. What she didn't realize was that most of her actual valuables were already in my storage unit. "I'll call you in a few days," she said as she loaded the last box into her trunk. "Take care of yourself, Lyra." "You too." I watched her drive away, and for the first time in months, I felt completely relaxed. Phase 1 of my plan was complete. Lyra had lost her career, her boyfriend, and her escape route to Florida. But Phase 2 was just beginning, and Phase 2 was going to be much more personal. Sunday evening, I got a call from Connor. "Lyra contacted me again," he said. "She wants to meet tomorrow to discuss my testimony for the divorce proceedings." "Perfect. Are you ready?" "I think so. But Mason, are you sure about this? Once I lie under oath, there's no taking it back. Connor, trust me. By the time this is over, no one's going to care about your testimony." What do you mean? I mean, Lyra's about to discover that divorce proceedings work both ways. Monday morning, I walked into the law office of Mitchell and Associates, the most aggressive divorce attorney in the city. "Mr. Reddan," the receptionist said, "Mr. Mitchell is ready to see you." David Mitchell was exactly what I'd expected. Expensive suit, confident handshake, and the kind of smile that suggested he enjoyed destroying people's lives for money. "I understand you're interested in filing for divorce," he said. "That's correct. And you have documentation to support your case?" I opened my briefcase and pulled out 3 thick folders. "I have photographs, audio recordings, financial records, and witness statements documenting my wife's adultery, financial misconduct, and plans to defraud me in divorce proceedings." Mitchell's eyes lit up as he flipped through the evidence. "Mr. Reddan, this is the most well-documented infidelity case I've seen in 20 years of practice." "Good, because I want everything. The condo, the cars, the savings accounts, everything. Based on this evidence, I think that's very achievable. There's one more thing. I want to file the papers before she does." "When were you planning to serve her?" I smiled. "Today." The look on Lyra's face when the process server found her at Jenna's apartment was worth every sleepless night I'd spent planning my revenge. According to Connor, who heard about it secondhand, she'd screamed so loud that the neighbors called the police. The divorce proceedings lasted 3 months and ended exactly as I'd predicted. Lyra's lawyer tried to argue that her infidelity was irrelevant, that she deserved half of our assets, regardless of her behavior. David Mitchell destroyed that argument with surgical precision. The photographs of Lyra and Alec, the audio recordings of her planning to leave me, the financial records showing her attempts to hide assets, Connor's testimony about her plans to commit perjury. By the time Mitchell was finished, Lyra was lucky to walk away with her car and her clothes. The condo became mine. The savings accounts became mine. Even her grandmother's jewelry became mine, since she'd abandoned it when she moved out. Alec Shaw never went to prison, but he might as well have. The federal investigation cleared him of criminal wrongdoing, but his reputation never recovered. His gyms closed one by one, his investors fled, and he eventually declared bankruptcy. Last I heard, he was working as a personal trainer at a chain gym in Florida, making about 1/10 of what he used to earn. Lyra tried to rebuild her real estate career, but the licensing board investigation had done too much damage. No reputable firm would hire her, and she eventually moved to another state to start over. Jenna disappeared from social media entirely after someone leaked screenshots of her encouraging Lyra's affair. Apparently, public humiliation wasn't as fun when you were the target. Connor and I are still friends, though our relationship will never be quite the same. He kept his word about the testimony, and I kept my word about not holding his mistakes against him. As for me, I sold the condo and bought a house outside the city. I expanded my security consulting business and discovered that I had a talent for helping other people document their spouse's infidelities. Turns out there's a lot of demand for that kind of service. I never remarried. I dated a few women over the years, but nothing serious. Maybe I'm too cynical now, or maybe I just learned to value my independence. Either way, I sleep well at night. People sometimes ask me if I regret what I did to Lyra, if I think my revenge was too harsh, too calculated, too cruel. The answer is simple. I gave her exactly what she gave me. She wanted excitement and adventure. She got it. She wanted to feel alive. She definitely felt something. She wanted to start over somewhere fresh. Mission accomplished. The only difference was that when I planned someone's future, I actually followed through. And when I promised to love and honor someone, I meant it, even if they didn't.